February 1990 was a very crucial day. Mr. Nelson Mandela was released from prison after 27 years. What better day to talk about justice for millions than today? 11th February is also celebrated as Promise Day. It's a part of the week of Valentine's Day, and one of the days is Promise Day. So I request all of you to make certain promises today based on what I'm going to discuss, and of course what the other speakers have discussed as well. When we talk about justice for millions, who are these millions? Just the humanity? Not really. Our planet also has flora, fauna, environment. All these are stakeholders, and today I seek justice for all of them on our behalf. We cannot exist in vacuum. So we exist, as I said, with flora, fauna, and the planet. Each of them are screaming for justice. When we talk about justice, I would divide it into legal and non-legal concept. I will explain how. There are two women who are suffering domestic violence. One of them is quite aware of her rights and seeks justice through criminal and civil proceedings. The second one, not so much aware. She goes to her parents. Parents tell her that maybe, little girl, you would have done something in your past life, and now God is doing justice, and this life you have to suffer. The girl tells herself, yes, this is now justice. So just imagine two women going through the same suffering. One seeks legal justice, the other seeks emotional justice, or maybe spiritual justice. Do you believe that the justice has been done for the second one? In our mind, the answer is no, right? So what will be required for the Indian society, and many of them would be in different aspects of their life, would be relying on this mental justice. What is required, we will see that, and I would request you to make promise to yourself to help those who are suffering like this in the daily lives. The other aspect, you see a short line and a long line there? What am I trying to say here? Sometimes when you talk about, for example, I mentioned environment. When we take certain decisions, the code gives certain decisions on environmental matters. Okay, this is okay, not so much environmental damage. This is sufficient because, development is equally important. So are we taking decisions for short term, for our generation, that this much environmental damage is sufficient, or do we have to think long term, doing justice to our next generations? These are the elements we as lawyers, as individuals, encountered on daily basis. So what has UN said, United Nations? They have declared certain sustainability development goals. And justice for all is one of them. At the same time, there are other development goals, such as environment, poverty, elevation, etc., right? So all of these goals are quite interdependent. So when we talk about justice for all, we also need to keep in mind what are the various facets and elements that have to work together so that, in fact, justice is achieved for all. Now let's talk about justice. What do we really mean by justice? In my mind, justice means, to put it very simply, each one should get what they deserve. When you hold your hand to your heart, you should feel that I am not wronged. I have got my due. Similarly for everyone else around you. Now let us discuss, I think we all know the preamble to the Constitution says that justice is not just legal, right? It's social, political, economic, and all of that. The other aspect, very, very important aspect, we always say, when you say justice, we always look at law. But is law sacrosanct? What is written today, is it sacrosanct? The answer is no. Each of us have a right to challenge the existing law so that the relevant society gets its due. To give an example, Vishakha's judgment of the Supreme Court ensured that the lacuna in the law is met and women are protected from sexual harassment at workplace. It took several years thereafter when the POSH Act was enacted, but Supreme Court came to our rescue in the meantime. Similarly, the British law, IPC, Section 377, all of us are aware, offense against homosexuality. There, LBGT community was screaming for justice. The Supreme Court came in and struck down that law. So let us remember, law is not sacrosanct. Wherever you, again, hold your hand to your heart and feel that the current law is not doing justice, we should be able to challenge that. That equally is a part of justice. Now we talk about access to justice. I have several things or several suggestions for our government and judiciary on that. When we talk about speedy, affordable, timely, all of that, right? All the adjectives that you can put across to get that justice or access to justice. What I've noticed over my practice, that nowadays law are very badly drafted. Excuse me my being blunt about it, but very badly drafted laws, that itself creates a huge amount of litigation. I think much needs to be done, whether it is laws by the parliament or as we call, some of you may be aware, the term called delegated legislation. That means the executive or the administrators write circulars, notifications, very badly drafted. So these get challenged in the court. People are aggrieved by that. They are wronged by that because the interpretation is not accurate. Different administrators interpret it differently, creating an inequality issue. Because in one district, the same law may be interpreted because it is vague in one manner for one individual, and in the other district, somebody else interprets it differently, creating an inequality for the same situation, which is completely against Article 14 of the Constitution, right? So therefore, in my mind, it's extremely important that our laws have to be better drafted to ensure justice for all or equality for all. Second, the principles of natural justice, very simple principles. No one should be wronged or rather sort of proceeded against unheard. Somebody cannot be judged in their own cause. A proper notice of hearing should be given to the parties. All these are basic principles of natural justice. But when we look at the administration, the way they administer the law, none of these natural justice principles are followed. Very basic principles, that much needs to be done on the administrative law by our government so that all the administrators are trained on the basic principles of natural justice so that each of us on our daily lives get properly heard. The next suggestion for the judiciary, there are several pending litigations as all of us are reading every day. Of course, the judges' vacancy is getting filled and several initiatives are being taken. But if you ask me who's the biggest litigant in the country, it is the government. Government needs to revisit all their cases and ensure that none of the cases are pending, whether by mediation or some other methods. Take assistance of ex-High Court or Supreme Court judges, but get the government litigation outside the court so the common man can benefit and get proper time with the court. These are few suggestions, of course, as I said, for government and judiciary. But what about us? A big question mark. What can we do every day? And here are my suggestions for that. Legal education. We have in India 1,721, as per the last year's number, law schools. What can we do better in our law schools? In my mind, if we have to achieve justice for all, just legal education is not sufficient. Education on ethics, empathy, sociology, psychology, all these are equally important elements for a lawyer so that they are able to address the needs of the community. And I'm going to explain how. If you really see, in India, there is only one lawyer per about 951 individuals. Is that sufficient? The answer is no. Then the question arises, does it mean that the litigants have to continuously go to court, depend on these lawyers, and only then will they get justice? The answer is no. All of us, whoever are law students, can contribute through the legal aid clinics. Legal aid clinics can be extremely important tools for giving justice or helping the judicial system in multiple ways, and we'll discuss how. Community mindset. Each of us come from some place or the other. Are we going back and helping that community with our knowledge? And I'm not saying just legal knowledge. Just being mindful of the rights of the individuals, rights of the as a society. When I say society, for example, access to good roads is considered as right to life under Article 21, right to clean water. So as a community are equally our rights that we need to be aware about. And of course, soft skills training, which is equally important to handle. Imagine a villager, when you're trying to help that villager, are you able to sort of relate to that? Are you empathetic to that? All these are important aspects when we talk about access to justice. So what are the real important elements to that? All of us are aware, I think it's not a hidden fact that in India there is a tremendous inequality at different levels, right? Which includes literacy related, financial related, digital related, etc. But at the same time, let's not forget that India has really done extremely well on digital penetration. Can we use that digital penetration, which by 2025, I'm told, 87% of the households will have internet. Can we use that access to create awareness? What are the various ways we can create awareness? Each of us have different qualities. Lawyers, of course, can simplify the laws. Some of the media professionals here can create interesting videos to communicate very complicated legal principles in simple words. Teachers in schools, as I said, when you hold your hand to your heart, the concept of justice should be understood, right? So right from the teachers, we underestimate teachers, unfortunately, nowadays in our communities. Teachers can do extremely well if they train the students on basics of law. When I say law, I'm not talking about like written law, but simple principles of law. Nobody should be wronged without, no theft. These are simple principles, right? So if in school we start these training lessons, that will be extremely important. And therefore, that girl who I spoke about, who was just dependent on her past life's karma in this life, will be aware of her rights right from school, right? Of course, interestingly, you would have recently understood, or rather, sort of importance of AI. Just this morning, I just, tried to test this. So I wrote that, suppose in Rajkot, I asked ChatGPT, in Rajkot, if I have a land dispute, what should I do? It gave me the answer. So use technology for that purpose. Similarly, as I said, in India, there are multiplicity of laws, you have language barriers, all that can be resolved through technology. I can't emphasize more than what I've said, but use of technology very creatively can resolve a lot of these issues about awareness, access to law, etc. I think this is the last 4 or 5 suggestions I have before I conclude. And here are the promises I would request. As I said, each of us, first I spoke about teachers, media professionals, then I'm talking about journalists. In India, you have seen that journalists have played an important role in investigative journalism to seek justice. Sometimes I have seen, I was appearing in Aurangabad High Court in one of the matters. Just before our matter, the judge said that I read so-and-so issue in the newspaper, and I'm taking cognizance myself of this matter. It was something to do with educational institute, and then called the educational institute and the government to the court and treated that as a public interest litigation himself, right? So we do have judges in India. If the journalists do an amazing job of investigative journalism without violating the legal principles, there are many of them, but this is not the time for that, but they can play a tremendous role. Mass protests. We have seen in some of the murder cases, rape cases, Nirbhaya case, mass protests played an important role to seek justice, to bring about change. In fact, after the Nirbhaya case, several criminal provisions were amended. Then, of course, at village levels, we can do a lot. For example, Lok Adalat, legal aid clinics. I have also sort of read a lot to sort of understand that typically at village levels, you will have similar issues coming up now and then. So some creative ways in which to identify what are those legal issues. And as I said before, if the law schools adopt these villages, there were 1721 law schools decide to adopt different villages across the country and help them and their local issues. They don't really need to go to sort of courts. Through mediation or other creative resolution mechanisms, the law schools can help these villages as well. We now have online courts. Online courts as well will play an important role, so all of us should seek through our sort of appeals to the government to do more and more courts online. We saw during the pandemic, suddenly we were able to adopt online courts. And in that regard, even at magistrate level or otherwise, so the people don't have to travel long distances. That is the other suggestion. And the last but not the least, social media. I think all of you have already heard Dhruti talk about it, but online petitions have also played a very, very important role. So with all these suggestions, now I want a promise from all of you that each of you will try to absorb whatever has been said today insofar as access to justice, and at least play a small part in ensuring that we seek justice not only for humanity, but for environment, flora, fauna, and have a sustainable future for all of us. Thank you.